Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Essential Credentials Side Credentials, episode 4. Today, I'm joined by a friend of mine who I got to enjoy the most recent national with, Ben Mercer. We spent 4 days at the national. We got to know each other, and it was pretty clear from the get-go that we had the same passion and energy for the hobby. So I thought it would be great to have him on. And today, he joins us. Ben, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing very well. Excited to be here. Excited to talk about Grail cards, my collection, getting into the hobby, getting to meet you guys. It's been a blast getting back in.
Awesome. Well, there's nothing like going to a national, hanging out with friends to kind of get you even more motivated to get into the hobby and collect cards, right? I think that's always been that way for me. I think some people have the fall off after the national, but I think it's pretty apparent between the two of us too that it kind of recharged the batteries even more. And we're talking with one another, and I mean, geez, we stayed up till 2 a.m. a couple times just talking cards and talking sports, and it just, when you're around people like that, it's infectious, right? So you feel like that's definitely kind of revved up the engines a little bit as far as the collecting goes for you?
Oh yeah, I mean, when I was talking with you guys, I definitely went into the show like more energized and like excited to really hunt down some of the cards I had on my list. And then I've had even some better success after the show because I kept talking to you and really thinking about some of these cards and like really trying to hunt down what I feel like I didn't see at the show. And it's really because I just kept talking to you guys. We had a little group chat going. I was like, oh man, yeah, they're right. Like, I got to keep pushing to find this one. I can do it. And then, I think without hanging out and getting to talk to you guys, I think I would have probably just said, I'll put that on the back burner. We'll wait for that one to come.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely something to be said about when you and your friends are talking about a certain card that you've been chasing, or maybe a set that you're going after, a player you collect. Sometimes you can get that affirmation from each other, right? Like me saying, like, I'm here to buy some Kobe Bryant cards. This is a whole new area for me, and I've never really gone into basketball really heavily to understand it. And we were sitting talking about why he's great and all these different comparisons, and it just charged me up. I'm like,
you're like, you know what, he is great. I do need to get some of these cards.
Yeah, exactly. And then, right.
I don't know about you, but what happens for me sometimes is we talk about a card and then I go back and I look at like a listing or a picture of that card, and it gets me like more fired up about it. Like, I don't know if that happened with you with some of the Kobe stuff, but you go and you look at it and you're like, man, yeah, every time I look at this, I'm like, that is really cool. I want that.
Right. Well, when your friends are looking at like the one card of him dunking, right, the acetate card, that hearing everybody go, ooh, to that card, I think it helps you appreciate it even more. And not only that, but just collecting him in general.
Was that the like glass looking one that you picked up at the show?
Yeah, where he's cocking it back like this and he's ready to throw it down. Yeah, that actually, card's incredible.
So that's absolute, isn't it?
That is from Elite. That is from
Elite. Right. That's Elite. Yeah. But because that card looks so much like glass, I have it sitting on my desk now. I literally bought this after the show. It's like the Ichiro.
Yeah, that looks awesome.
They had these, and I had it like I might pick that up. I don't know what I'll do with it. It doesn't go anywhere. It's literally sitting here because I have nowhere to put it. But after I saw that card, because that card, even though it's acetate, looks kind of like glass because it has like some of the fuzzed out parts on it, which is how they do like the player on these. I was like,
right.
Immediately when I got back, I was like, I'm buying this. I need to have this now. Like, seeing the Kobe made me so jealous of the way it looked. So again, one of those things wouldn't have purchased on my own, but after seeing yours, I was like, man, that does look cool. That's a cool aesthetic.
Right. We've all experienced that where a friend of ours is hyped about a card or a player. Just you and I talking. Speaking of which, Ray is here. Ray, nice to see you. How you doing? Big Ichiro collector, of course. But
oh, I know.
Us talking about Ichiro, I was like, I need to go look up some cards of his. And so it's so funny how infectious that is, especially when you're talking with someone who has that same level, that same passion for the hobby, right? And a lot of the people that we talk to have varying levels of that. But when you meet somebody who's kind of on the same plane, I mean, I'm sure either of us could talk one another into maybe purchasing something. But, in regards to just that fire that you've got burning for the hobby, where did all that start from? Because we all have our own origin stories, per se, getting in the hobby. I think a lot of them have some similarities. But really curious, like, where did that fire get ignited for the first time? And how has it kept on going all these years?
So I started collecting when I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina in 1996. And so this is the 90s when you move to a new place, you just get on your bike and go through the neighborhood and like find someone to hang out with. So you just like
Right.
find a cul-de-sac and it's like, oh, these kids are playing baseball in this cul-de-sac. I'll just go say hey. I ended up becoming friends with those kids. Kid John that was the same age as me. His dad was into cards, so he had like a 50s, 60s collection, and he was getting his
Oh,
son
nice.
into it. They were serious about baseball, and so what he would do is he would make us do chores around the house or in the yard, and then payment for the chores was a pack of 1993 Upper Deck. So you could maybe get that Jeter rookie in there, which is not even a great Jeter rookie. And like those cards were already bricked anyway because they were glossy.
Right.
So you always would like you do 4 hours of chores and you hope to get that one Jeter, and then you get a bunch of bums from '93 because that was a
Right.
huge checklist. Um, but he had a little collection. And I was like, man, that's pretty cool. I started watching baseball. Griffey just became my guy when I started out, and we happened to have a card shop like 2 miles away from where we were living. So I'd go into that shop and I would, I'm 7, 8, 9 years old, like getting into the late '90s it was the perfect time to get in, right? That's when
Oh, yeah.
everything changed for cards. So I'm getting excited about it. I'm start reading getting the Beckett. Like they would get copies at the store and they would let me take one home because I would stop by there all the time. And so they would let
Nice.
me take one and I would like read the new sets that are coming out, read the articles, like check the prices. And they actually got me started by giving me some cards to like start my collection. And I
Oh,
started
cool.
doing mowing lawns, that kind of thing. And I would go in and like buy a single or trade with them. And they were always like very favorable in the trades. I'd be like, I have these 4 common Griffies. Can I get that one finest one? They'd be like, sure, that's fine. Sure. You know,
Nice.
$6 a card for like a $40 refractor at the time. Um, so they got me really into it, and then just started going to shows, like really trying to like build a true Griffey collection. Of course, like the '97 Upper Deck jerseys, like for me, changed everything because I was just new
Right.
into it. I was like, they can do what with cards? They're putting jerseys in there now. How cool was that? So like,
Right.
it became my mission to get those 3 cards. Um, and then, I mean, so that's kind of how it started for me. Then with everything, like the second I got my car in like 10th grade, I was like, well, yes, that's over. Girls don't care
Different
about cards.
priorities.
So these go under the bed.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and that is where they will stay until really like about 2018. I started kind of dipping in again because I just remembered them. We moved, and so I took some stuff from Charlotte, and I had some stuff to get from my parents' place. Um, and the cards were still just there, like in the closet. I was like, you know what? I'll take these with me. Same box I'd had from when I was a kid. It was like a three row shoe box because I started with a 2 row. I grew enough in my collection to have a 3 row box, which was a big deal.
Yeah, man.
Um, so I took
Nice.
that box with me, and then actually one of the things I have on the desk here is like to this day. So now I just have like 2 cases that I keep my PC in. So not I don't have
Mhm.
like a huge collection. I try to keep it like really scoped to what I'm interested in. But one thing I still use is I took all like the letterings that I used for my first box ever. And so these
Nice.
are the first ones I wrote when I was a kid, and they were on the back of like note cards that I had, I guess, for school or something when I was
Yep.
learning who knows what. And they're the same ones I still keep for my PC. So
That's cool.
now I flip through, and the cards are worth a lot much or a lot more. But it's a nice little
Cool.
reminder when I flip through. It's like it's still a hobby. This is just a thing I liked when I was a kid, and like
Mhm.
I guess it's like a fun sort of like grounding thing. You flip through, and you're like, it's a kid's hobby thing. Like, don't take it too seriously ever.
Right. Well, is that what really just made you decide to get back in? Because so many of us that have been on the podcast or that we've talked to, people that we've met over the years, we all have our own reasons for why we got back in. And mine was in 16, yours was in 18. Like, what was it that you saw, or like what solidified that decision for you?
I think it was grabbing that box and like flipping through it again and being like, that was a fun thing to do. Like
Mhm.
as you get older, work gets more serious, just life gets more serious, and you want like some sort of reprieve. And for some people, it's like video games or golf or whatever, like some sort of hobby. I was like, I'm kind of lacking something that's kind of just fun you can enjoy. There's like I know there will be a community around it because there was when I was a kid. Like
Mhm.
I know it's still a thing, but I don't really know what's going on with modern cards. I haven't kept up with it in any way. But it was that sense of like I remember how cool this was, and flipping through. Of course, you flip through like a childhood collection for me, and you have all these memories of like a time you picked up a card. You have like a cool story, and there's a search for it. There's an element of the journey to building a collection. And I was like, that is going to be fun to do that again. As an adult, you have a little bit more money. The cards that you're like, which of course, even in 2018, getting back in, there's some sticker shock when you go back. And you're like, man, you know, I always wanted one of those, whatever it might be, the 99, finest gold refractor with a decal edge. You're like, I always wanted one of those as a kid, and they were like $40. There's no way I could have afforded it. And now you go look, even in 2018, you're like, pooh, okay, even with adult money, I still can't afford it.
Right. Well, and our buddy Blake also is going through that exact feeling right now, the sticker shock. We were trying to get him to buy a Tim Duncan, and he did get a really cool one the other day in the mail. But he's kind of on the fence about actually committing to do that because, as collectors, we don't just kind of, go in a little bit, like dip the toes into the hobby. We either in or you're out, right? And when you're in, you go for it. And he's going, man, I'm looking at these prices of Tim Duncan and what they used to be when I was growing up, and even a little bit ago, and this is crazy. How could I justify this? I think it definitely takes a little bit of time to talk yourself into why they are what they are, because that's especially people who have just came back during COVID, they must have had even more sticker shock because
brutal.
It was ridiculous for all of us that were already here, right? But I think, are you still feeling like it's so much, it's still enough fun, and the cards are amazing enough that it can justify the difference in prices that you're seeing now?
Yes, and I can say yes because if we're talking about my PC, I don't necessarily PC like a specific player or even era. I have like some focuses. I would prefer like a Bonds for 90 stuff, and then post 2001 like an Ichiro. But if there's just a card that's aesthetically pleasing, like just a good design, great card, you can find one of a player that might be like adjacent or like a B level Hall of Famer still of that card, of that design, and get it for $10, $15, where the Bonds of the Griffey might be 1,500. So you can still, like, I know you guys have talked about this before, like the backup card to fill in the spot in your PC. I get it if you're a player collector, that would be like a sore spot for you to have, like, I don't know, if you're a Griffey guy, to have the Jay Buhner of that is like, it doesn't hit the same. But for me, as like a collector of just, in some part, just the hobby and like the history of the hobby in baseball, for me, it's just, it's a spot where I can pick it up and go, that was a really cool thing they did that year with this design or whatever they decided to do with, a different technology, an acetate or a decal edge die cut or something. You just go, this was really cool, and I respect the innovation here. So it's a way to get in without spending too much money and still getting stuff that can be, if you appreciate just the card for what it is, can still be fun.
Well, yeah, especially collecting the card before the player. It feels like it takes the pressure off completely, which not a lot of people, collect that way unless they're maybe set collectors, right?
I feel like you pivot around a little bit. You'll find a guy, like you'll find a Glass Now or somebody that's like, okay, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but there are times where you're like, I want to collect in this space, but I don't have a guy, and you'll find someone that you can relate to that's like reasonably priced, right?
Yep, I always do. I've been that way since I was a kid, as far as being a fan of different players, and so deciding, on Justin Jefferson and Duncan Robinson, Kobe Bryant. I think in Tyler Glass now, of course, there's a very specific reason why. And
Kobe is the wild card for me because he's got to be the highest priced guy you've decided
behind Jordan. Yeah. He's right behind Jordan. Michael still outsells him on most things, especially because he's just got the biggest collecting base of anybody, of any athlete. But
yeah, it just stands out as a pivot to me for your collection, because you're like, Glass Now, Fleury, Kobe.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is too, looking at being a basketball player for many years and coaching and still going and working out and being able to, besides the dunking and the stuff where you're elevating above the rim. That's not me. But, you go and you watch a player like Kobe, and it's like falling in love with his game even more, because I hated him growing up because I loved Iverson and I loved Wade, and he killed us all the time. But just watching his game, you gain a bigger appreciation for it. And I think if you look at some of your collection, like when we would sit at the National, we were sitting at the house and you were talking about, we had those discussions about athletes, underappreciated, overappreciated, overrated, underrated, whatever. You would talk about how it would tie into a card in your collection, right? And I think that makes it so much fun when you can be a fan of a player and also collect their cards, right? I think that adds a whole nother dimension to it, rather than, I'm collecting Kobe because I think they're going to be worth more in 10 years. It's definitely not that.
Yeah. I mean, it does sit back there a little bit, right? Like, you have to know there's like
a little bit, yeah.
But it's not the driving factor. Like, you're conscious of it when you're making a purchase, right? Because with Kobe, you're making purchases that are going to be consistently probably over $100, and you have to think about, like, that's $100 I'm spending on something. So it's a bit of it, but it's not. It's certainly not like the whole thing when it comes to picking out a card you want to grab.
Right. Well, it's been fun too, because it opens up to learning a whole new market. Right. I think it's good as collectors. You're this way because you're kind of collecting on a broad spectrum. You got to educate yourself on just not just the market, but what's currently in demand, what is up and coming, like what are people talking about, what are people not feeling, what could be up and coming. I mean, there's all these different factors to educate yourself on, and I already did that in modern baseball, modern football, modern hockey, 90s hockey, for the most part too. And then now basketball, it's like, wow, this is a whole new world, and people are very different about their collection. But at the root, everybody still loves their cards because they love them. I think most of the people that I've talked to. So, funny talking about that too, I feel like it was awesome that you got to bring your dad with you too, because it was great to see his love for just conversation when it comes to cards and sports, but also his love for collecting. It seems like that is kind of infectious when it comes to you too. Like, I definitely felt similar energy between the two of you as far as like why you do it and how happy it makes you. Do you think that has also kind of helped with you and your enjoyment of the hobby again, like having your dad talking about it with you?
Yeah, and he was one of the ones that was really supportive in the beginning, because he thought it was cool, and a lot like you see kids now. If you go to a show, it's a way to learn the value of a dollar, and in a way, like how to run a small business for yourself. Like, you're a little entrepreneur as a kid when you're doing it. You're trying to like trade up, find the stuff you want, acquire like the inventory you want for your collection. There's negotiation, discussions about what to do next. Risk taking is when you're looking at like current players that are actively playing. So he was like really supportive of it. And then as I got into it, he got more into it. And then he got more into like the history of baseball and that kind of thing. And I wasn't as into it as a kid. I was like, Ken Griffey Jr. is the best ever. I don't really need to care about who played in the past, whatever.
Right.
But as he started finding some like older cards from like my grandfather's era or when he was growing up, and he'd be like, I'm going to buy this one for myself because I think it's cool and you can hold on to it, but it's my card.
Right.
So he kind of got into it from that side. And as I got back in like 2018, looking through some of my old stuff that he had bought, he had purchased like a lot of like pre-war, like the T206, those old like tobacco cards, that kind of thing, for like pennies on the dollar, because no one really cared about those back in the late 90s. A few people did, but it wasn't like a common thing that people would seek out those cards. But in 2018, I got more into like the history of baseball and looking back at those cards. And when I saw there was some 90s stuff, I was like, it's going to take a while to get that. I want like another avenue, much like in the way you'll swing between like a sport or a player, a glass now, or maybe it's going to be this that I pick up, or this is dried up over here, I'm going to look over here. Like the old like tobacco cards became like another thing for me to sort of chase, like the origins of baseball, like the history of them. The fact that at this point, they're over 100 years old. They're like a piece of history. And that became like a different thing to chase or try to build a part of my collection around. Also, because it kind of relates to kind of maybe the overarching theme for my collection, which is like the history of the hobby, right? Like the origins of the hobby are the little cards being put in packs of tobacco. Like that's the first card that was really printed. So if
Mhm.
I'm really going to say I enjoy the history of the hobby and how it's evolved, well, you have to have like a starting place. That has to be part of your collection, right?
That's
Um,
cool, man. Yeah, I always appreciated that when you talk about it that way. When somebody's talking about something you don't collect, I think I said this to you about a month ago, right? I said, I don't really have any interest in collecting those ever, but I can really appreciate someone who wants to collect it because they want to learn about the history of the game. And then you go into depth and when somebody cares about something that much, it's like, all right, like educate me now. Tell me a little bit about these. And just when I see them at the shows, I'm thinking like this thing is over 100 years old. This is crazy. Like this thing is so old, and everybody's got a story about a card that old. Like, oh yeah, this player, this. It's really fascinating to me. So that must make it really fun for you too when it comes to discussions because it's a great conversation starter if they're just a fan of the game, right?
oh yeah, and especially because that's old enough that there isn't like clips of them playing that you can watch. It's like it's it's just like stories. So it's like fables of this person used to do this, and they would, back in those days, old King Kelly would, drink 8 shots of whiskey by the 5th inning and play. Like there's all these just stories of guys that like you don't know if they're real or not. It's just hand me
Right,
down. It's folklore almost at that point, which kind of makes it fun. It's just a,
right.
a a different thing to collect, but it's fun to talk about, and yeah, it's a good like conversation piece as well as kind of sticks to my theme and my collection. And then to that point, actually, I wanted to ask you, like, what's the thing? It's like you get it in 2016. I don't know if I'm sure you've talked about this before, but like, what's the thing that gets you in and gets you like excited to like really ramp up a collection? Because for me, I have the nostalgia of the growing up as a kid,
Mhm.
kind of knowing the 90s pretty well already because I read just about every Beckett as they were coming out. So for me, it was like, well, that's an easy entry point. I already know it. I know I'm going to enjoy it because I enjoyed it as a kid, that kind of thing. But I'm curious
Right.
for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to say hi to Project 50s, by the way, since we're talking about vintage baseball. What's up? Thanks for dropping in. Um, yeah, I mean, it goes back to the roots, right? With my dad and collecting Joey Cora, Ken Griffey Jr., A-Rod, Mariners, right? And then I moved from that, well, hockey, and then moved into basketball before I took my hiatus until 2016. I mean, I think I got in and I kind of saw the community that was built, and that's when the Facebook group started really ramping up, and it was just wonderful to share that passion with others, right? Because I was in Sitka, Alaska. There was one guy, one teacher that collected, and he collected vintage, like Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle, and well, I can appreciate that. I mean, we had nothing in common as far as the cards
But
we collect.
so
We just started matching.
you had to go to the social media side because you really don't
Yeah.
have like a local outlet. See, I didn't even do the social media thing. I don't think I joined like the Facebook group until like
Wow.
2020 afterwards. Like
Wow.
I just because I came from the era of you go to the LCS, you find people in person, you make trades, you go to shows. Like this is an
Yeah.
in-person hobby. It's like it didn't even
Mhm.
cross my mind that I should think about like an Instagram or a Facebook group, like that kind of thing. And then when I was like, all right, I'm struggling to find some things even on eBay that I know are out there, and someone's got them. Where else can I look? And I found I was like, oh, like I didn't even realize there was a community online for the hobby at all. Like it just
Mhm.
didn't. And I work in software, and it wasn't even a thought I had. I was like, this is totally like a good old boy kind of thing because that's what it was in the 90s, right? It was like
Yeah.
the
Right.
same in my area. It was the same like 80 dudes at every show.
That's too funny, and I almost wonder was it better that way, right? Because the social media side of things is great when it comes to networking and of course finding cards to acquire. I mean, a couple of the cards that are in front of me, let me think here, three, four of them I would not have without the ability of social media to connect with somebody, and so but at the same time, you're also taking that pressure off, and I think it's a good pressure. But you're seeing John and Dave and Adam all getting this card that you're like, oh man, like he's got Manny and A-Rod and Bonds, and I really want the Griffey. Now I want it more. So
Right.
I think that kind of took a little bit of pressure off yourself by not jumping in. I mean, I'm sure there are positives and negatives, but it's kind of interesting how you approached it that way.
Yeah, just from I literally thought things hadn't changed since the late 90s. somehow I decided to ignore the fact that the internet came around. And really, when I was starting collecting, that was when eBay was like really becoming a thing. But it wasn't like you didn't like go to it as a go-to and like save searches at that time, right? Like it was just here's like a bigger market to maybe find something. But you would go like look at the listings and get an idea of what the card was, and then you would actually go to the show the next month and try to find the card. That's where you were going to do the buying. You wouldn't buy it on eBay. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's not like that anymore. There's just too many cards, like you can go into the show in Seattle today. It was crammed into a hotel, room or whatever, not a room, but like a big,
like a conference room.
Yeah. Conference room. That's what I was trying to say. Thanks. And it was super crammed and super hot, and kind of all the cases were kind of jumbled, not really organized. And so you're going in there looking for 90s Kobe. I think I found 5 or 6, and they were pretty much the same ones. There was one I was back and forth on, but back in those days in the 90s, you could go and see a Kobe and you'd see 3 or 4 of them at the show, because that was all anybody had.
That was current. So,
so different, for sure. But let's I want to say hi to the Barnett collection. Thanks for making it here live. We're happy to have you here, man. Welcome. Let's dive into our first topic here, Ben, because I'm sure we could go into the origins and stuff, but talking about card shows and whatnot, and when we went to the National, we had probably a card in mind. We both did, right? Like maybe not as much me, because I was just getting into Kobe, but I knew what flurry, if I saw it, I was going to leave with. Like I already have it in my head. It's been there for years. But we have like a Grail card. We have probably 2 or 3 cards that sit at the top of our want list that are like the ones where your heart tries to jump out of your throat because you're so excited. You just get stunned when you see it at a card show for sale. Going through that process of getting a card like that, and most of us, those cards are quite expensive and quite rare. So there's a lot that goes into, deciding which card or cards that's going to be. And then when you actually find one for sale, being able to make it work. So, going back, when you started getting into collecting in 2018, you're starting to grab a few things, and you're kind of deciding which directions you're going to go, which, are you going to do some modern, do some, T206, do a little bit of 90s Griffey and everything in between. How did you come to the decision of what that Grail card was going to be? Because we all have stories behind why that one card is like the most wanted on our want list or whatever.
Yeah, so I will say when I got back in, I didn't have a specific direction, which is also a dangerous place to be in. If you just start with buying, they're like, I'm gonna get back into Griffey, and I started buying some like lower level insert Griffey stuff that I thought was cool. Was something that was like 1 in 60 packs or something. So it's just that's a tough card to get when you're a kid, like pulling that. But now it's worth $8-9. Kind of started going that direction. Then was thinking, all right, I want some of the higher end stuff, but I really just got priced out with Griffey. So I kind of had to like abandon that. Then I started a direction since I got into like multiple eras. Oh, maybe I just want to get like an autograph and like a rookie card of every player that's in the Hall of Fame, and like that'll be my collection. Well, you hit a couple and you're like, that's going to be a snag. And then that is guaranteed to be incomplete at some point, and that's going to be a problem. So I did that for a little bit, and then I really just started to think about what were the players that like I just appreciated the way they played, and also kind of fit into an era where I could enjoy collecting that. So I kind of ended up with like Bonds and Gwynn for like 90 stuff, and then really for me it was like Ichiro, just because the way he played and his like stature, like he's the same height and weight as me. So it's like there's almost like that. It's one of the things I love about baseball too. When you watch it, it doesn't actually look that hard, and then you go to try to hit a fastball, and you're like, oh, actually, this is basically impossible. But he's like this smaller guy that just made it look like effortless, and just 10 years of 200 hits. Just he played. And another thing I really like about him is he played kind of like Ty Cobb. He played like an old school, early, like no power, get on base, steal bases kind of game. So I kind of appreciate that he feels like from a different era of baseball, the way he played. And so that got me really excited. I remembered 2001, like the Topps cards coming out, the Pujols, Ichiro, rookie, them both on the same card, just having like insane rookie seasons. Ichiro became my guy, and then for me, the Grail came down to I want an Ichiro autograph rookie card. he was in like a weird contract thing where there wasn't a lot of signing, so he ended up with only 2 upper deck cards. One's a cut auto, one's an on card, and they're like both basically all in collections at this point already. People who collect Ichiro don't just let go of Ichiro rookie cards
especially
on a
now.
whim.
Right.
Yeah, especially now that he's coming up to his what will be a Hall of Fame like first ballot induction.
Yeah, for
And so
sure.
I kind of focused in on, man, that 2001 the SPX card, because I will say this too, when it comes down to finding a Grail, the more you think about it and narrow it down and then decide on one, the more you start to critique every copy that comes up. In some way or another, you find a reason to go like, this isn't the one because it's the grade, or the auto's a little faded, or it's a 10-10. I don't really need a 10 PSA 10 with an auto 10. That's crazy. Who needs that? I just want the card. So you find a way to kind of like justify not getting every copy.
Mhm.
And there comes a point where you have to just realize, like, if it's a Grail for you and the way the hobby's going, the card is just going to be more expensive every time you wait on a
Right.
copy. So you have to kind of decide, like, what's a criteria for you that's like a non-negotiable. And for me, it was the autograph being a 10, like the autograph being like perfect.
Right.
So then that was the goal, was like really hunting that down, getting a price point in mind, looking at comps. And then honestly, for me, when it comes to a Grail piece, it's comps plus like 20% that I put away for it. Because you just know, if you find the right one and you have to pay more, do it. And I'll ask you, is it not one of the worst feelings to see a copy of something you really, really want in person, walk away, and then just think about it for a week?
I mean, I almost left without buying that Duncan Robinson Nebula 101, and I had that thought go through my mind. You know, who else is going to be looking for this card? First of all, and second, if I walk away, I might never see this again. This guy doesn't have a social media presence. He probably just going to hold on to it till he trades it to some yahoo who grades it, right? And now I gotta.
And now
So
it's a PSA 10, and now it's a problem.
yep. And so I didn't want that feeling, but not as much as I wanted to actually have the card. So you're right. It is something you got to weigh when you finally do see a card that's that big of stature. I want to ask everybody that's watching, because it's fun to get people involved that are in the chat right now. Curious, Ben and I would like to know, what is your Grail card that you're hunting right now and why? Like if it's like Ray who got in here first today, his was the Ichiro Ultimate Auto, and he had this incredible collection. When I first met him, didn't have that card, and so I knew why. But I'm curious what everybody's Grail is, and if you could throw in why, that would be great. But that's a great question, Ben. And with you though, you're lucky because your Grail has, how many copies of that card exist technically?
That's a really good question. I don't know that there's a specific print run, but it's probably 500 or 1,000. I would guess it's 500 cut.
All right.
I know that the on
fair.
card one's at a 250.
Right. That's very fair. So let's say there's 500 of those. I mean, you're going to see another one. It might be a few months. It might be a year. You're going to. My Grail for Fleury is out of 5, and I know where 3 of them are.
Changes the strategy entirely. I tell people, if the numbering is less than 25, what I'm talking about as a strategy does not apply to the out of 25 or less. No, totally different strategy there.
And then your whole plus 20% totally changes. Then you're like, I have to leave with this card. So it's, it's really tricky when it comes to that. But for you, you have the luxury of having stipulations to saying yes or no to this Grail piece, because you will see one. Like I just saw one at a card show right after the National. The auto was faded, but it was so cool to see because it was right after you got yours. And I just thought it was great that it actually, showed up. But at the same time, it's great to be able to, be a stickler for a card like that, because when you get a card of that magnitude, you want it to be perfect in your eyes, And so leading up to that, you had that chance pop up about a week or two ago, and you were presented with a legitimate chance to get your Grail card, but it wasn't just as easy as, yeah, sure, here's the money, was it?
No, because this was a guy that had posted it a few times along with other cards. He does shows like in the Florida area. So for him, it's inventory. He's bought it like specific prices. unfortunately, because he came back in around the COVID times, he had paid kind of higher prices, kind of at the peak for some of his inventory. So he was like a little, and he knew how rare like getting a 10 on the auto grade was, and that was kind of his big sticking points for his price. Was like, you almost want to find someone who doesn't know as much about the card. They happen to pick it up in a swap or something, and this guy happened to know enough about the card, how tough that is with the cut for it to be off center, part of the auto like missing. It fades a lot because it was sounded like a paper stock that just fades a lot more for some reason. So yeah, it ended up being like it's one of the upsides to something like a Facebook where you can have a discussion with someone like that. So it ended up being like a talk back and forth, like get to know each other a little bit. He actually knows I'm just buying it because this is like a big card for me. So yeah, it wasn't just as simple as like, oh, you have it listed for that. Great. I'm going to pick it up. I'm happy with that copy. It was let's get to know each other a little bit. I want you to know why I want this card. And I know that you posted it. This is like for a select group of people that know this card and like would really enjoy having this in their collection. And that's kind of where we were able to get to know each other a little better. Now we're like friends on Facebook. He's like a super nice guy. So made a friend out of it, but also was able to like come to a reasonable price where we were like both happy about it and left it open because he seems to be able to source in some like 90s, early 2000s stuff in Florida. Awesome. So I was like, hey, leave the door open. Like I would be a repeat buyer with you. Like, and I think that was where I said, I will buy from you again if we can agree on this, because I see the kind of stuff you get in, and I'll be keeping an eye out. And you let me know if you find one of. I sent him a list of cards. Like, if you find one of these, shoot it to me. I might be a potential buyer for any of those. And that kind of the purchase with I could buy from you again, like you have me as a customer, I think was part of the negotiation that made it work out. So yeah, not a buy it now, not that easy.
Not smashing the bin. Well, I like what you're talking about because, as I've mentioned on this pod before, or even the side credentials, I'm building up those connections with sellers or just hobby friends is so important in this day and age because there's so much out there and social media is everywhere. And so people have connections. And if you are a trustworthy, kind, caring individual who has the same love and passion for the cards that the seller does, or they can tell that, when I tell people like, hey, look, I collect Duncan Robinson, and I bring that up a lot because nobody collects him, right? Nobody does, like maybe 5 people. And so when they hear that, or they hear like, oh, I've been after this Ichiro for this long, this is why, like this is the centerpiece now of my collection, it would be. As a seller, I love when I've heard that. I don't sell much, but when somebody tells me something along those lines, I'm like, I'm glad it's going there. I might even do it for less going to this person because now it's going to an amazing home. And so, you get all those factors to think about when you are working out a deal with somebody for a card of this magnitude. And it sounds like it ended up working out great. Do you have it in front of you there so we can all take a peek?
Yeah. This was my copy.
There it is.
The mirroring. Yeah, so you can just see it's still got like the blue and the signature. It's like really well centered. And this is in 2001 before he changed his signature to kind of be the swirly thing that he does now because he signs so much. So this to me is like the true first signature for him. And you can just 10 on the auto, obviously. And then the 6, there's nothing about the card that screams 6 when you look at it. Like, it's not an obvious problem, which is a big deal for me. Like, I'll take the 6 because I get the 6 discount, but it's not like, oh, it's a 6 because when I look at it, I see the problem. There's like a crease or a really bad corner somewhere. Right. So for me, that it ticked all the boxes. Something in the PC, I just want a copy of it, but I'm particularly like care about the quality of the signature, and it nailed that. Yep. Ray would know that one. You see framing all over the place on that card and fading all over the place. So for me, that was like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And like, yeah, of course it happens like a week after I searched all over the National for it.
Well, but that's sometimes how it goes, man. It's so weird how sometimes you'll see something that you're looking for, and maybe you see it and it's way too expensive, but then something else shows up later or right afterwards. I mean, it's the hobby is so strange like that. Just want to say a couple things here. So Brent welcome to the show. We were just kind of covering currently what it's like to acquire or how you can prepare to acquire a Grail card, because it's always going to be a really big decision financially and for your collection. A few people shared their current Grail cards. So we've got a 98 Essential Credentials Future Work Done. Easy to see why that's on there.
That's even one where my strategy would be out of the, like, not apply here, right? It's out of 55, but those credentials just don't show up. So you kind of have to just have that stashed away, probably plus 30% of what the last comp is, and just be ready.
Because they're just headed. The Beckett arrow is headed up, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. And here, speaking of Ichiro, I mean, this is the creme de la creme when it comes to his refractors.
I do not have one of those. That's is that one numbered to 99? It was also a redemption. I have an English. I have the regular refractor English and Japanese version, but not the golds of the X Fractor. Those are whew.
That's beautiful, though. It's an amazing card. I saw one at the show too. Well, by seeing I saw one. There's like, you couldn't even get to any showcases. So this is my 6'3" height coming in. Oh, yeah, there's an Ichiro refractor for 1,000. All right, so. Yeah. But it was very, very helpful. It's cool to see. The 98 PMG Kurt Schelling, again, the strategy of hoping another one's going to come up. It's out of 50. You might as well be out of 5, right? Or 10, because it just shows up that infrequently. I mean, think about it. It's out of 50, and he's seen one picture of it and never seen one for sale.
90s out of 50 means how many have actually been opened, how many were thrown away. So you really have to cut the number down and say, realistically, there might actually only be 20 copies in circulation.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And of course, the 52 mantle. I mean, that card speaks.
Sell everything I own and get one.
Yeah. I don't think we need to say a lot about it, just because it's every time you see it in a display case, you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna stop and look. The 97 embossed refractor Frank Thomas. You and Greg both, Jeff. You guys both for it. Might get into a gladiator type battle to acquire a card like that. Those are all fantastic cards to have on that Grail list. I mean, and they all fit the bill. A lot of people would consider those. And then let's see, up. Okay. They just don't come up. Yep. Gotcha. Yep. And then Ray said the 99 is English.
It is 99.
50 English, 49 Japanese. Yeah.
That's
awesome.
Awesome.
Wow. And then D-Ritz. Yeah. That's the Red Crusades are as Grail as you can get, you know, but I mean, we all have them there for a reason. Because I think there's probably, I don't know if you'd agree with me, Ben, there's probably people who have Grail cards that might never get it, right? So
I'm actually there with I Collect Ichiro. Like, I don't know that I'll actually ever own, even though it's on my list, one of the gold refractors of the Bowman, the 2001 Bowman Ichiro. Like, that's on my list. I just don't know if that's actually going to happen. You keep it on the list because you don't know how things are going to go. Maybe something happens at some point. Actually, I have a good example of that. So, like, the Grail for me was that 2001 SPX Ichiro, but 2 years ago, I woke up super early for a meeting, work. One of those mornings where you kind of roll over and you just decide you're going to look at eBay real quick, save search. I have 2001 Ichiro on there as one of them. And wouldn't you know, this card popped up, which is just the regular chrome from a guy, and right below it he had, and this was $200, and then right below it he had listed this card raw for $200 as well.
That's crazy.
And I was like, either that's a mistake or I don't know what's going on. Even if they're both chrome, I'm going to purchase both of them, because it was a picture of like them sitting on like the arm of a couch. Like, you know, those crappy photos where you're like, this person doesn't know, I don't know, who knows what's going to happen here. So I just bought them both. I was like 400 in. If they're both chromes, they look pretty decent. I can grade my way out of one of them, whatever. Sure enough, showed up, and it was the Retrofractor for $200. Like, insane story, insane luck to pick up this card. Like, was one that was on my list, and I was like, this was one where I was like, I might not get it because it's just so expensive, and the backs are so prone to damage. Like, that's one where a 6 is going to have all this chipping on it that's going to bug you with those things.
Right.
But I guess to my point, I love that card, and it's kind of a fun story to be like, I picked it up for $200, but I actually enjoy the SPX more just because of the getting to negotiate with someone. I had hunted for it for so long. The Retrofractor was like not something I was really hunting for at the time. It just happened. So it's a great story, but when I look at them both, I actually enjoy the SPX more because of the story and like really hunting for it and like honing in on exactly what I wanted for a copy for my collection and
Right.
really knowing the card and what problems to look out for and what to really hunt for and what the right price would be, and then getting to like negotiate with someone and make a friend. Like if I pick them both up, the fun around getting the SPX really just outweighs the retrofractor. Even though I think the retrofractor is a beautiful card, there's like something about the hobbiness around acquiring the SPX that to me just like adds more to it.
Oh, for sure. It's the complete story, though, like, or complete package, I guess you could say, right? You're getting multiple experiences and emotions tied into this one card, as opposed to buying it on eBay. I mean, you still have the thrill of it, right? The thrill of getting the card. I mean, I guess the best tie-in I can have is when I was really collecting A-Rod and I got the Quantum Leap. It was
Huge
probably
card, yeah.
my, that's still probably one of my greatest emotional experiences in the hobby, because not only, was I able to work out a deal at like 6 a.m., but when I got the card and got in contact with the seller on eBay, she was selling her husband's cards for him, and that was his only really nice card, and he had pulled it from one of those lunch pails, the 98,
Oh,
you
the
know,
retro lunch pails, yeah.
retro lunch pails I had. I don't know which one it was. It would have been cool, but to have and I still have the snap case from that card. It came in the original snap case that he put it in right after he pulled it. And currently, Jeremy is holding it safe, keeping it safe for me until I buy another one, and then we can trade, and then I'll have it back. But
yeah, to trade to get back that exact
yeah,
copy.
exactly. So, I mean, that was definitely that kind of an emotional experience, because you're having that connection with the seller, and I think that was what you're talking about. I think we all, anybody that's in the chat right now, anybody watching, think about the last big card you picked up. Not just like, oh yeah, it's big because it's worth $200, but like one where you've been thinking about it for years and years and years and years. For Ben and I, that card, that 2001 Ichiro, I remember when it came out, and it was in Beckett over and over, and he was out there
It
dominating.
was on the hot list for like 2 years.
It was, yeah, exactly. I remember seeing pictures of it, and I had it circled. I was like, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to use my paycheck as a commercial fisherman and buy, like, half of it's going toward this one card, which is ridiculous, right? But yeah, I have a question in regards to that card, which is really fascinating. When that card came out, it was a $900 card, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep.
So if we look at the value of that card then, and we look at the value of that card raw, for instance, right now, it's kind of crazy to think that card, and it's because he has so many autos, probably that's part of it that kind of kills it, because he's got so many out there now. But you look at that compared to what a retrofractor was worth back then when it came out. I mean, the percentages are not even close. Why do you think that SPX hasn't, percentage-wise, maintain the climb that the rest of his cards have, most of them at least? Why do you think he's like, even some of his rookies are cheaper now, right? I saw a reserve rookie for $50, and that was $100 card or more back then. So why do you think the SPX hasn't really caught on like the Ultimate or some of his other cards?
I think it's two things. One, what you said, that there's a lot of signatures out there now. Two, I think it got hurt by the like jersey being everywhere. Just the influx, like relics do not get any love anymore. It's actually a disappointment in modern cards, right? Like if you buy a Topps, 2024 Series 1 or 2 box, there's a chance at an auto, or you get a relic. And if you get a relic box, you're like disappointed. So like the stigma around a relic now is brutal. Like you literally don't want a relic. The autograph is the only thing that has any value, but also they just sign constantly. So I think that's probably hurt the card. Plus, in addition, I think the price that they put on it in the beginning was so over. Like the retrofractor was book value at that point, like $80, and they put this at $900. I mean, what are we talking about? No cards were worth $900 in 2001. Like the idea of a $900 card, like that wasn't a thing. I think it was the hype, and it got to that price as well just because his rookie year was insane. So they were like, oh, he's like the new biggest thing in baseball. I mean, he hits 350 and steals 50 bases. Gets an MVP as a rookie, all-star. I mean, they're like, this is the best thing ever. So of course, the autograph, and it was only what you would almost say like an RPA, right? Like a rookie patch auto, like that was the only one. So I think there was just a lot of hype around the card. Was it actually worth that much? I don't know. Maybe a couple people paid that much for it, but yeah, the climb that you get on the other cards that have gained respect over time makes a lot more sense than this card being so highly valued at the time.
Right. Great point. I mean, we were just talking about the Gold Cup, Gold Refractor, and that's, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful cards that exists. And there's no print run to them. They were 1 out of 4 packs, but it was a humongous checklist, so you're not going to get the Ichiro out of a box, right? But you look at that card and what influence the rest of the hobby has on that card. Everybody wants a Gold Cup of the best player, of Judge and Acuna and all these other great players, and Soto, Harper, right? Having the Gold Cup, Gold Refractor. I mean, that's a big deal.
That
and
2002 one that has the Gold Cup on it. Like,
exactly.
When that card came out, even in 2002, when he was still hyped, it was like an $8 card.
Yeah.
Now a PSA 10 of that card's probably worth $2 to $3 grand, which is like crazy. It's a second-year card, but it's that Gold Cup thing.
Right. It's just like you're talking about, though. It's how what's going on in the hobby right now that's popular or unpopular, like you're saying, the jerseys and the autos, has such an influence on him. And it's really, I feel like we're due to see a pretty big market correction when it comes to him, because, he is arguably going to be the first unanimous position player ever voted into the Hall of Fame. If somebody doesn't vote for him in the Hall of Fame, I would be shocked. Probably the same guy who didn't vote for Griffey, but yeah,
that guy needs to not be allowed to vote anymore. Hopefully he's not around anymore.
Yeah, that's absolutely silly. But I mean, coming back to it, I think having just that whole, now you've got a story to tell, right? You've got the story to tell with the card. You've got the card. I mean, you've probably looked at it at least 30, 40 times. I mean, it brings back emotions from when you were younger. I mean, it's just, it kind of ticks all the boxes, right? And so I thought it would be fun to talk about that, because when you decide what that Grail card is going to be, just like all the people that we've talked about in chat, if they ever acquire those cards, I mean, you come down from this emotional high after the card comes in the mail, you open it, you look at it, you share it with your friends, you share it on social media, and you get some love that way. And then you go do the same thing for others. And then you kind of come down off that emotional high, and then you go, okay, now what's going to be next?
The valley is rough. The valley is rough. Because now you think, well, what's the next one going to be? And you start planning for what the next card is going to be, and you just realize the journey is starting over. And that's both exciting, right? Because you have the next thing you can work towards, but you realize like how much time goes into, like, impatience goes into getting the next one. And you realize, like, all right, that's where the community part's great, because you can kind of talk like, hey guys, this is, now that I got that, I think I'm gonna start looking for this. And then you have your buddies go, that's a killer card. Yeah, maybe I've seen one of those before. And you kind of have to build, it's almost like building inertia again. You have to build the momentum to like keep you, or like get you moving towards the next one. Because for me, like I fund all my cards by buying and selling other cards. Like I keep all of my card money separate from anything else in my life. So for me, I have to go, okay, I'm at this amount now. That card's going to cost this much. I need to go like find some things that I can buy, sell, trade it into something bigger that I can sell for more. And like, you almost have to, or the way I look at it is like in a mindset of going back to work to get that comps plus 20 to 30% to be ready for the next one. And then know if it comes up when I'm not ready, like talk to the person, reach out to them, figure out if there's some, a layaway plan, tell them what you have. Is there stuff that I have that you would be interested in as like a trade? But, if that happens and you figure out if you can make it work, and if it doesn't, you just go, I'm just going to be prepared. I'm just going to work to be prepared for the next one. And then if it doesn't come along for 2 years after you're ready, that's kind of how it works.
Right. And because we just don't know, right? We don't know if and when that card is ever going to show up. And when it does, guarantee that, you're not the only one that's probably going to be wanting that card. I mean, one of the better feelings, though, that we probably all experience too, is where you've talked about card A or card B being in, like, I've got to find one of these. And when it does show up, whether you're asleep or not or whatever, and you're getting Instagram notifications and Facebook messages and getting tagged on Facebook. You're like, oh, okay, I see this. It's really cool to see your friends looking out for you because you would probably want to do the same for them, right? And so it's a really fun experience when that card does show up, if and when it does, I will say. And actually on that topic, I have something here that I thought would be fun to open on camera because I haven't seen it for the first time, but a couple more messages here. That's, I mean, just like Alan's talked about the Bonds out of 2, you know,
it might not even be out there.
Yeah, exactly. That's a huge card. Obviously, the Prime Choice Reserves, they are, there's no way 100 of them exist out in the world. Many of them probably didn't survive kids opening them and putting them in boxes.
I opened like 4 boxes I got from a hobby store once and didn't pull a single Prime Choice of any player out of 4 boxes. Right. So I don't know what the print run was on that product or what, but like they aren't out there. It's crazy.
That would be fun to find out someday for sure. And then Project 50 said for me, it was the unreleased Kurt Schilling Crusade set. I pull them out and just look at them almost every day. Good for you, man. And that's another topic I would love to talk about, with you, Ben, in the future. Is just, what are we doing to enjoy what we already have? You don't have a very big collection, so you need to be appreciating what you have there, right? And often because there's going to be influxes of editions, and then there's going to be times where nothing shows up. And so, just like you're coming down off of that emotional high right now, after getting the Ichiro. So this card, Ben knows what card this is. We saw, well, I don't think you saw, but I saw a copy at the National, and I wasn't ready to spend this kind of money on it.
It was packed up. You were going to get it, and I was going to go pick it up for you, and that table had been packed up on Sunday already.
Yeah. Well, because I thought, for me, it's I'm not a big graded card guy, so if something is graded at an 8 or lower in PSA, it's worth thinking about busting it out, unless you're talking like some sort of vintage card. Then it's that you don't touch that, right? But so this is a card that when it comes to 90s and iconic 90s designs, I think even if you don't know basketball that well, you know this set because it was so unique. Jean and her team designed these, and I think they came out perfectly. So without further ado, these new eBay packages are definitely different than they used to be. Have you got any of these eBay authenticated packages before in the mail?
Me? Oh yeah, a number of them, and it's a little inconvenient. And I also don't like the time of waiting and having to be shipped to a second location. There's a whole. Right. I appreciate it, but also I know what I'm buying. I wish I had the option to click a checkbox and go, just skip that.
Right. Well, especially because I've seen a couple cards get returned because they didn't match the description, but the title and the card are the same, right?
Yeah, I had one because they had something in their title about like mint when I knew it wasn't, and it got returned and couldn't make a deal privately.
I've been lucky to work out a deal with a seller like that off eBay before, which has been amazing. But I guess let's take it out of the sleeve. Here it is, an SGC 9. That's Jam, Kobe Bryant. Now, if people are not familiar with this set, each card has a different type of jam depending on the player. And, some might be grape, some might be raspberry. This one is strawberries. They're acetate. Just such a fun design, and I'm very, very pleased being able to add one to the collection for the first time. I feel like when it comes to iconic 90s basketball sets, this is not affordable, but it's kind of affordable compared to others. This one's definitely up there, right?
Oh yeah. And like 90s acetate, like those cards, I mean, come on, you're tangential to a credential at that point, and the EX set, like you're looking at like a similar vein there.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, when we think to acetate, whenever I see an acetate card in modern, I think to myself, okay, well, I know where this started from. This started in the 90s, and what a fun thing to incorporate into card collecting, right? I mean, that decision must have been a pretty big one. Kind of fun to think back. When did we first see it? I mean, here I am. We're doing our '90s podcast. We ought to know the answer to this. But like, when did we first see acetate in a set? I want to say it was '95 or '96. Hey, thanks, guys. I appreciate that.
And actually, there was some. Do you remember Classic or Classics?
Oh yeah,
That
that's
company,
right.
they did some stuff. I think maybe in '94 that was acetate.
I have a '93, '94. It was like yellow though. It wasn't clear. It was kind of a yellowy.
Yeah, not
the
attractive.
color kind of faded into it. But yeah, that's probably it then. That's great thinking. That's crazy that it would be them, right? I mean, now that you mention
like those guys. Some like tier C company was like
that's wild. But I mean,
we're talking about the origins of stuff.
It's continued on, right? It's continued on even to modern now. And there's an upper deck set called Synergy that certain people like Jeremy Lee, for instance, most people know who that is.
Mm-hmm.
Does an amazing job with his podcast and his YouTube channel. He loves that set because it harkens back to the '90s with the acetate feel that it has and like the layering of cards, very EX style, And I think you're going to see a lot more people that would love to see that in modern, because all of us are kind of have been collecting '90s for however long, and you want to kind of spread your wings a little bit more, right? And that's why we wanted to talk about our last topic today with everybody is be curious to see in chat, how many of you are collecting '90s right now and collecting modern? Like how many of you are kind of, it doesn't have to be 50-50, it could be 90-10 or, whatever, but how many of you are kind of going back and forth and collecting modern players or modern sets and also doing '90s and back? Be curious to see that.
And I think they made it fun because there's some throwback sets and stuff and tops for baseball, right? So you can kind of collect a modern guy with a '90s feel, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Okay. And Brent, can you maybe elaborate a little bit? Like what is your reasoning behind that? Like, so I was going to ask Ben, like you mentioned this on the phone the other day when we were chatting, and you do appreciate both, right? You were telling me about a rainbow that you put together from Pristine of Ichiro. What is it about the modern sets that you find, interesting or alluring to kind of go and dabble in and then maybe collect a little bit? What kind of draws you to it, even though you're pretty rooted in the '90s?
Yeah, it ends up being kind of specific sets. So I do like to keep up with like the current releases. So like one recently that I really liked was the Topps Chrome, the Platinum Anniversary they're doing every year now. They started 3 years ago with the 52 design. It's like this year the 54 design, which just I always love. Harken back to the Hank Aaron rookie. That whole set's just really pretty. And that one just gives you a fun chase for a rainbow, because the rainbow has like an insane number of colors and variations of the colors. So it makes for a fun chase that, depending on your player, isn't going to be like insanely expensive until you get down to the fives, in that era. But if you want to just collect like the regular version of each, the green and the red, the gold out of 50, like those, you can get them for like relatively inexpensive, and it makes for like a fun thing to look forward to. There's some stuff like, I think case hits or something different that we didn't really have in the '90s. We had obviously Diamond Producers 1 and 288, kind of thing. But there wasn't like there's one of these in every case, and so there's some scarcity, but they're available, like that kind of thing. They're trying in modern. I feel like this year we could probably do a whole other side credentials on how they're kind of trying to evolve inserts and parallels in modern cards now. But I think they've worn out the rainbow about as far as they can go now with all the variations. And I'm starting to see more inserts come into play, which I think is cool. Like this year, Finest and Chrome both had like more and more like interesting insert sets. That I think is, again, harkening back to '90s. So it's fun. I think they're trying to make inserts fun again. Inserts were so cool. That was the thing you wanted in the '90s, was the insert.
I say it all the time at the card, or when I'm at the card shows, when I'm talking to people, of like, look at that card right there. Like, that is a super cool insert. I mean, like, just compare, and then I'll show a few comments here. This was an insert that I remember as a kid, and I still love it today. I really wanted an Iverson, but the opportunity came up to get the Kobe of the 3D. Sorry for the shoddy lighting with this camera here. My bad, everybody. I'm making this card look terrible. But this was a huge card in the 90s, and I always looked up Iverson, like, can I get one for cheap? Can I get one for cheap? So you have that in 90s, but then if you look at, like, for instance, Luminance Football, they did this animation set, and oh my gosh, there we go. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
so fun. Like, it's kind of like an anime version of Justin Jefferson, and it's got,
That's what they did with
believe it or not, some
Bowman and
amazing
baseball.
stuff.
They did the anime set with like the 1955 Bowman
Yeah,
design with the TV, and it's an anime
those were
character.
huge when they came out.
Yeah, they've dropped off a little bit, but like another one that comes to mind. So they're trying to do stuff in modern sets that I think a few of them actually hit and make an impact. And one for me, I don't have a copy of one, but every time I think about it, it's beautiful. Is that Panini, like the Color Blast? Those,
Yeah,
like the Griffey of that, perfect picture of the finish of his swing. Color Blast, white background reminds me of like the SP or SP Authentic, like white color, perfect shot of the player.
yeah.
Like they did something right there. It's Panini, so I'm not stoked on it, but
Mhm.
aesthetically, like that would kind of fit in my collection of something that you just aesthetically is pleasing and I think is going to be here to stay and kind of changes
Right.
the game a little bit of like, no bleed, really cool color, different idea. Like they did something there, kind of like downtowns and that kind of thing, or
Mhm.
like a new thing that's going to stick around. That one really
Yeah,
stands out to me.
but we need more, right? We need
We need more.
more of those kind of insert sets. I mean, because every insert set, you look at an insert like this, the gravity denied. You got a die cut. It's got
Yep.
shine. It's got some really cool, like, a theme to it, and great text, great font, great everything is like unique about it. But this wasn't a tough card to hit. This was like 1 out of 36 packs. So like one every 2 boxes, and so you definitely need to see more of that, but we're headed in that direction. Even when I think about hockey, they've got this set called 16-bit in Allure, and you think about playing Super Nintendo, Tecmo Bowl or Madden or NHL, and you'd zoom in on the players' faces and they'd be all pixelated, but you could kind of tell it was them. They're kind of playing on that, and that's an insert set that's really landed well. Like Connor Bedard's was like a huge chase card, and it's fetching a couple $1,000 for as a case hit insert. No mem, no auto. I mean, I love that we're headed in that direction a little bit, and I would love to see more of that because it brings you back to the 90s, and so it's fun to get the feeling of the 90s in modern, right?
Right. So I have another question for you since we're talking about stuff that kind of changed the game or like inserts that kind of made something different. So, one of the staples in my PC is I have all of these from 90 to 92, but this was the first pack inserted autograph, right?
Wow.
This was 1990 Upper Deck. And it was the only insert in like the whole set, right? So there's only 2,500 out there. And so you're ripping cases looking for literally one card where there's only 2,500 of them, which sounds like a lot, but that's not a lot when there's nothing else to chase in the entire
Right.
product. I'm wondering, do you have a thought, and this is going to feel like an impossible question to answer, but do you think there's another thing on the horizon for cards that would be a big game changer, like an autograph, like an inserted autograph?
Well, they tried in hockey and a little bit in basketball, like making these super thick cards with like little videos that would play in there. But I think you're crossing a threshold that is just, storage and whatnot. It's just so awkward. It makes it really hard to make those popular. My thought is always like, what is something like there's so much potential with game used that are not regular. You got to a player that wears a certain armband, like Julio has an arm sleeve that he wears, probably wears a new one every game. You get
and it's like the same look every time, so it's his.
Right, exactly. So looking into how can we bring value back to mem cards, to cards with chunks of game used material, because and I don't know if you have them in front of you, you talked about the first game used Upper Deck set. I mean, those are iconic, but yet the value hasn't been held because there's so much game use.
Gosh, I have all three, but this was the first one I got when I was a kid.
Okay.
I traded a first edition holographic Charizard for this.
I mean,
one is worth more than the other. I'll just put it that way.
Who cares? But what you have, you like a lot more than the Charizard. So, but
oh yeah, I would have sold the Charizard. I'm keeping this card forever.
Forever.
I think I did a trade value of $100 for that card, and I think it's still worth about $100. But you know what? It's worth a lot more to me.
The intrinsic value is going to be way more than anything else. But that's a great question. I'm curious what you think too, Ben, because where else can we go? Because there's different printing technologies is where I think we're going to have to start looking, right? If companies are going to have to make these unique cards, your designers and your foils have to really work hand in hand, and it's got to be a great picture, right? Just like the Kobe dunking, you've got to have all three of those elements and make it unique. And how can you do that? And get to everyone, right? Get to the kids, get to the adults, get to the old time collectors, get a card that everybody's going to go, what do you think though? What do you think is could be the next thing to bridge that gap between uniqueness of 90s and modern?
So one thing I've thought about is sort of what they tried to do with NFTs, which was there was like a value to the NFT outside of just an NFT. I don't know if you know anything about it, but like some of
A
them
little bit.
provided like access or something with the card. So like if you or the NFT, so if you had the NFT, you could also like you could go to these unique specific places. They would fly you out to this thing or this event. I wonder if because we're almost there, I'm sure there's something out there that's a material that we haven't used for a card yet that would be interesting. You know,
Yeah.
photography, foil, all that stuff is important. Autographs are a thing. We've tried. The problem with memorabilia is thickness and storage and being able to display. There's a bit of a distraction, or it's going to cut out a certain portion of the market, right? If you put the cleat in a card and it's this thick, who is that for? Maybe there's a few people that are going to be like, that's kind of cool, I guess. I really think if they could do something where the card itself is designed really well, and then with it comes like maybe an experience or something. I'm just trying to think of what can we do beyond the card that would add something to it. Maybe you get the card and it's got a something where you can sign into a secure site, and like you get to go out and meet Ichiro and he's going to sign a few things for you, and the card is like basically your ticket to that. But the card in itself is really cool, but it also comes with like an attached something with it. So now I have this memorabilia that came from me getting this card. I don't know. I wonder if we're just at the limit of the card and there's something else that has to come with it to add, like what would be the next level of a signature on a card? What is the next thing?
Right. Such a tough question. I'm curious what people in the chat think. Where can we go next? I think if you are collecting, even if you're not collecting modern, I think you still kind of keep your finger on the pulse of the hobby per se. Like you are seeing what's coming out. We're always going to be interested, but where do you go next? I mean, like you said, we've reached so many limits, but we have to find new technologies and new ways to keep it exciting and not just repeat, because that's what Panini and Topps, Panini Prism do that. I mean, the only reason it's different is the case it inserts, where I'm like, okay, let's see what Jefferson's got, when they came out with the mangas for football. Those were a huge hit. These animations, when they first came out in Luminance, they're $400, $500, $600 cars. Now they're, 150, 175, which is great. It's a good resting point. But
what is the answer? It's get Upper Deck back into baseball cards, and then a few other companies in there, so we have some competition, and then those guys will figure out the answer. I don't know if I can sit here and figure out the answer, but get 5 or 6 companies competing, for collectors, and they'll figure out something like they did in the 90s.
I think that's the dream for all of us to see Upper Deck and Panini and Topps all collaborate, or not collaborate, but at least have a friendly competition within doing, cards for all the major sports. But I can understand why that's not the case, because it's a lot easier for those sports. They just have one license to worry about and just pump all those resources toward that one company. And I think it's great in some ways, because it makes it easier for the companies, for sure, especially Upper Deck, who are a bit smaller than people might realize. And then, as well as for the big companies too, right? But I know it's the dream. It's the dream to have even 2 making the same thing. Like when Panini Hockey was on the scene, dude, they made some incredible cards. I mean, all of us hockey collectors, I feel like hockey collectors are so passionate. Not to say take anything away from the other 3 sports, but if you collect hockey, there's a specific reason why. Most people don't just do it because Marc-Andre Fleury is worth a lot of money. Well, they do it because they love that player, they love that team, and they love this and that.
Hockey sellers are that way too, right? How much hockey did you see on a table with other sports at the National? At the National, if you saw hockey on a table, it was just
all hockey.
It was
Right?
all hockey. Yeah, like they're all in on that.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff, man, for sure. But that would be the dream for sure. A couple of our comments here, like the X Factors of Max. Yep, Ginter Chrome. The first year they did that, they've not
Love
come
it.
close to it since then. That was such a beautiful set, and I'm so bummed that Glass now didn't make it into that. That
I
set
know.
was fire. And the case hits were fun too. The X Factors were really fun to chase
There's
down.
speaking of baseball history, since they brought it back, I have the set of the original, the Ginters. So these are
That is
from
amazing.
1887. So
That is so cool.
it's one of the reasons I love that they brought back Ginter. Because it's like, oh yeah, you guys are recognizing that's baseball card history. Like the
That's right.
first color cards.
Right. For sure, man. It's great to see where the history of those cards come from too. A lot of people don't know that, especially if you're just kind of getting into modern. Kind of what people were saying about how they collect is, 90s and back, not any new stuff, which totally understandable because there's so much. It's hard to keep up with it all. Totally get that. Occasional modern, and that's like Ben was saying too. It's great to have laser focus even if you're going in modern because there's so much. And so when I'm at this card show and I'm looking for just if I see football, if I see any Justin Jefferson, I can stay. If not, I can just move on because if you're just kind of just grabbing this and that, like collecting how Ben does in the 90s, but with modern, oh my gosh, I think
it would be a nightmare. And I do agree you have to be really picky with sets because there are some sets that just don't hold value, aren't as aesthetically attractive, aren't as desirable for collectors. So you really have to like do your research on modern stuff for a set to be like, all right, what's in here? Is it going to be worth it? Is this worth picking up? And will I actually enjoy it? And there's so many top sets now that, man, yeah, you have to wade through.
Can you tell me a set in modern right now that piques your interest when you see it, whether it's a base set, parallel, or like an insert set, where when you first saw it, you really liked it and you still kind of look up cards now and then? Is there anything that fits the bill?
I mean, so like just base set, like 2018 Topps Chrome, crazy gorgeous design, like perfect, like aesthetically perfect design. Insert set, Topps has not hit me with an insert set that I've been like really excited about for a while. There was the Seven Wonders that was in that pristine, maybe it was the second year. It was like kind of a case hit set that also had like a rainbow, of course, with it. But it would be like a player with like seven wonders of the world kind of behind him. It was super rare.
Okay.
That was kind of a cool, like different idea. But it's been a while since I feel like like off the top of my head, something I'd be like, man, that would be like an exciting one to pick up of Ichiro. Because he generally makes it in those like legend style sets.
He
like,
has
do you have one, like a baseball one?
Yeah, I was going to suggest Julio Rodriguez had the show set that came out that was his set from Topps, and the case hits there are 5 anime players, and one of them is Ichiro. And I keep going back and thinking that would be a really cool card to get because it's so unique in the art style. But then again, that's the artist making it unique, right?
Right.
And it's got foil, on it, like holofoil, which looks awesome. But like something has to really hit me in here. I do think even though they're cheap, the home field advantages, those cards look awesome because like for me right now, I'm in Seattle, right? And so Julio Rodriguez with the Space Needle behind him or Pike's Place Market behind him, like that kind of stuff is cool, man. I think
modern day Skyline, pretty much, right? That's kind of the same idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. But I mean, there's not a lot. And I will say, Topps has fallen short on a lot of their case hits. If you look at most of the Julios, they're cheap and they all kind of have a silver border and they're not like, there's a few like the cosmic case hits, the ones with the planets. I think those are awesome. Yeah. I mean, how many times can you say I bought a Uranus of my favorite player?
That was actually, that was different. I actually appreciated that they did all the different planets. Each planet got like more and more rare as it went down. So you wanted to collect like the full run. That was something they hadn't done in a while. That was like a different version of a rainbow kind of, because none of them are numbered.
Right.
So it was just pure scarcity. Like I appreciate the effort. I don't know if it's going to hold up. I don't know if in 4 years people are going to be like, remember the planet run thing. I think it was a cool novelty to like sell that product and probably fun to chase in that moment. That's where I keep going and I'll look back like 3 years ago and be like, does anything from 3 years ago still hold up as something that's like desired by current collectors? I think that's the
Well,
real test.
and that's a great question, because not a lot, I think, other than like a really rare parallel, something out of 10 or less. But I will say something that could have made that set stick is have a different photo on every planet.
See, that's
Right?
where I think they missed. It should have been like a different point of their swing or something would have been super cool. So you put them
Yeah.
together and it creates a full swing. Like if you want to make a run interesting, you got to go outside of color and give me something
Right.
else.
Right. Especially a company like Topps. Like, you can say what you want about the funding of what it would take to put 9 different photos on 9 different planets for Julio Rodriguez. But in that case, when they're that rare, the last 4 planets in the solar system are so rare, you gotta
Yeah.
make the full effort towards it. So
Yeah.
I agree.
Make the
But
chase worth it.
yeah, makes it more exciting for sure. But there's definitely a few out there that kind of tick the box, but it's not perfect. Hockey has potential, and then Panini with their football, and basketball, their case hits. That's
Yep.
their bread and butter, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So Ray says card manufacturers should host events for collectors that showcase rare cards. How cool would it be if a card was out of 5 and you could see all 5 together? We talk a little bit about this when we were all together, like how cool it would be to not have anything for sale, but having something as big as the National. We all have our PCs kind of
Yeah,
out for
we
everybody to
joked about
see.
that. You just display all of your cards. Nothing's for sale. You can just go walk around
Yeah.
like it's a museum of collections. But that
It
would
would,
be cool if there could be like a display, Topps doing something like that where they put like a run of the cards together so that you could see them all.
yeah.
Like that
Well,
would be
and
fun.
imagine Ray too. Like, imagine, you, Ben. Imagine if you set up your collection, the T206s, meeting other people who have those cards. Like, the conversations you would have with those guys would go on forever. Same with Ray meeting a guy who's got another Ichiro that's out of 5. Like, me, if I met a guy that's got, a Marc-Andre Fleury, like, you just immediately you have something to talk about in the connection, and the discussions that you would have. You're coming from 2 different sides of the United States, or maybe somewhere else in the world, and now you've got this, common frame of reference with your cards, and you can just go for it. I mean, that would be the dream. It would probably be impossible to do it because you'd have to do it per sport, and you'd have to somehow narrow down the parameters, or you'd have thousands of people in there with everything. So that would be
How
cool.
different would the crowd be though? It'd be kind of nice. You have people that are just true collectors showing off collections. That'd be a totally different crowd from a show, which is very money motivated.
Locally, you could do it. That's a good point, because it would just be collectors. You feel like if you did it locally, right? If you did in a certain city with people just from that state, you could possibly make something like that work. Possibly.
I think Ray's onto something here. That would be a different kind of like a social event. Like you make it a social event. Maybe the ticket price is a little higher to cover everything, but that
right.
You're onto something there. It's a good idea.
And then you do a trade night afterwards, or you're just there and you can walk around and talk cards with people. I mean, the security would have to be pretty high, because you'd have some
PC stuff in there. Yeah.
in there that, like, I think we have some wonderful collections, but we both are well aware that there's people out there that have multi-million-dollar or more collections, and so
right.
that would be a little rough. But yeah, I think we did a good job on dabbling into that last topic, because for me personally, I think it's fun to be able to see what they're doing now, find cards that are exciting, that modern cards that are exciting, that kind of remind you of your origins and your roots in collecting. I mean, even for you, right? When you see a Ginter card, you're immediately like, oh, that's a cool Ichiro Ginter. This reminds me of this original, right?
Yep. Oh yeah, I've purchased many Ichiro Ginters from the 2010s, just as like I appreciate the style and the aesthetic of this card, and I get to have Ichiro on there.
Right. Well, that's cool, man. It'd be fun to kind of dive into it a little bit more. We do have the next Pristine set coming out next Friday, I think it's next Friday or next Wednesday, which is exciting for us because both of our guys, Ichiro and Tyler Glasnow, are in there, and I think it's great. I remember when Breakers opened that 2 years ago for the first time and had like the card.
Oh, they were so pissed. The pack within a pack thing. They were like, I don't understand this.
We did. We knew exactly what was going on. I'm like, oh yeah, this is perfect.
Like, this is exactly how it should be for a high quality product.
Yeah, exactly. But so that's going to be fun for us to kind of go through and do a little bit of rainbow hunting, because it's not too big of a rainbow. Thankfully, it's small enough and unique enough and beautiful enough that each one is unique. So That's fun. Let's end, Ben, with just a few rapid fire questions for you, just so people can
Oh
kind of
boy.
get to know you a little bit off the cuff here. No preparation, if that's fine by you, and then we'll
Shoot.
say goodbye for today. Couple of thoughts on that. Manufacturers have plenty of money to make it happen. They need to give it back to the hobby. Yep, give back to the
Yep.
hobby.
Talk to
100%
fanatics.
right. You could have sections for different eras of cards. Yep. I mean, different days for eras, even. I mean,
Yep.
for sure. I mean, he nailed it. Can you imagine that? Like,
Dude,
oh,
I would love to do that. Like, just see a bunch of 97 embossed refractors just walking around and seeing a bunch of them.
And every one of them, just like your Grail card story, everyone's going to have a story for those cards. I mean, yes, there might be a few. I got into the hobby in 2019 and saw money to be made, and here we are. It's like, okay, I respect that. But then again, why did you decide those? Was it just the money? And I bet you most of them would say, yes, but also these things look amazing, right?
You had to learn enough to know that was a card to chase, too.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. And the beauty of those any of those cards speaks for themselves. Yeah, good idea. And then it would be an amazing sight. Yep, it should work. Sure would be. All right, Ben. Let's do like 4 or 5 here. And I do this when I used to be a teacher. I used to love doing this. It's like, oh, I got 5 minutes to burn in class. Let's do this. So now that the Ichiro has been acquired, your Grail is in your collection. Even though you're recouping and you're kind of, you're in a valley per se, kind of. What has ascended to number 1 on Ben's want list?
Another Ichiro card, and it's one that I should have by now, but don't. It's the 2001 Topps Gold, numbered out of 2001, the gold border.
All right.
Out there for the grabbing. I just need, again, I've looked at that card for long enough. It has to be the right copy. Like, it's one that I actually want raw.
Okay.
And everyone is graded. So I just want one raw or a 6 or 7 that looks good that I can rescue.
Okay. Has there been a card now that you acquired this that you took off your want list? Like, okay, that's one, this Ichiro's up there. It's like, we'll just get rid of this now.
Yeah, another Ichiro, the ultimate, the on-card auto. Now that I have a rookie auto, I feel like that's just one. I would say it stays. Do you have like a ghost list where it's not on the list, but it's kind of, on a list?
Yeah.
That one's like off of the true chase list for now, because I feel like I've scratched that itch. So that was one that I had up there with this one that, I was kind of looking for one or the other. But now that I have one, I can kind of like put that one to rest, put that one on the back burner, I guess, for a while.
Okay. Next up, if you were to decide to collect a player in Modern, like I do with Duncan Robinson, because again, he's cheap, it's fun. I get to find, I didn't get a chance to. A peacock variation. Really, these exist. I think these are the coolest thing ever. I love these so much, and they're
Basketball's gotten wild with the variations. Like, I got the zebra print.
Right. There's some, I have one that has toilet paper on it with Tyler Glassknife, and it's just ridiculous.
They have a Monopoly set. They're going wild over there.
But, and you get to chase the rare stuff down, just like the 90s. You chase the rarest of the rare. But if you were to collect a player, like, in the way that I collect Duncan Robinson, who do you think you would pick from any sport that's in Modern right now?
Freddie Freeman.
Okay. That's an easy choice. What about 90s? Who would you pick in the 90s?
See, I say Bonds because that's kind of the guy I go to. If I had a backup of Bonds, probably Gwynn. He's like Ichiro, 300 hitter, just does the job. Excellent fielder. That would be my other dude.
Yeah, it's extremely underrated price-wise. Like from
price-wise, it's crazy. Yeah,
it's nuts. Okay, and then last question I'll have for you: if you could open, we're going to do it 90s and Modern again. If you could open any 90s box, what would you pick? Yeah, just one box of 90s. You can have any one. You only have one, but what box would you pick?
There's so many different answers I could give for that, right? Because you could just say the most expensive box, right? Just go for like a 9080X and just shoot for a credential. But I would love to get like a 98 Bowman Chrome box and pull the gold anniversary refractor Tim Salmon.
Speaking of which, You opened a box of 99 Flair Ultra, did you not?
I did. I didn't pull the card out, but yeah, I did. I found a cheap box for like $80 at the National on the way out of the show on Sunday.
And out of it came a
Yep, the platinum medallion Tim Salmon. On a huge checklist, I pulled the Tim Salmon.
I mean, that's about it. I mean, if that would have happened in the house, I think Greg would have fallen off his chair. I would have ran around in circles. It would have been crazy in the house for sure. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. That's an interesting choice. That was different than I thought you were going to say. And then what about modern? If you could open a box of modern right now, any box, no matter the price, what would you pick?
So, I mean, from this last year, the Topps Chrome Platinum Anniversary, because you get in one hobby box, you get a guaranteed autograph, 6 refractors, 6 colored refractors, so like whatever color, red all the way up to like the out of 499 with like the Topps logo on it, and an X-fractor. So literally in that box, like I opened a box, more than half of the packs you get something in it, and they all look really cool. You get some shine. Like, to me, that's when you can open up and it's like a fun open, relatively inexpensive. I mean, at the time when it came out, it was $120 for a box, and you get like 13 inserts basically in a box, plus an autograph. And you have your retired players. Like, again, for me, I'm a history guy. You could get a Wagner or a Roberto Clemente numbered, that kind of provides everything for a guy like me that loves the history of baseball and the modern stuff with the rainbow, and you get an autograph. Like, what's not to like?
It's a great choice. I almost walked out of the hobby shop the other day with one, but they wanted $220 for it, and
they went up so much. It was and that's when that could be a whole other episode for us, is how do we analyze upcoming products and whether it's worth investing in a sealed box or getting some and selling boxes, or is it worth opening, value on return, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that could be very interesting, especially now that we're both, now that I'm here and you're where you can go to a hobby shop. It's like being able to kind of see what people are talking about and ask the hobby shop owners, and definitely get a different read on the hobby being around it more often.
It's one of the fun things about modern, right? Is you get to like follow the buzz, what's going on in the hobby with the current buzz, and you kind of get a pulse on what people are thinking, and it keeps it fun, because while I love the 90s era more than anything when it comes to collecting, what was made is what was made. It's not going to change outside of us discovering some backdoor, something that might have happened here and there, or you get on Baseball Cardpedia and you find out something you didn't know. It's all in the past. It's been produced. There's like a finite amount there. So, to find the energy to keep learning, you kind of have to start looking at modern stuff.
Right. Well, eventually you kind of run out of things to learn. I mean, you're still learning a little bit, but you kind of learn all that is learnable with the 90s, especially with how many people are out there willing to kind of fill in the gaps for you. But modern, there's always going to be that little bit of potential of this could be made, or this could be done, or what will be done next. Like with Pristine coming out next week, I'm very eager to see if the pink refractor can live up to when it came out 2 years ago, because I thought those were
the out of 15.
Yeah,
that was the first Ichiro I picked up. The like Pulsar version, the encased version, pink out of 15. That was the first one I grabbed.
Those are, I mean, for anybody listening that likes a little bit of modern, you look up the pink refractors from the first year it came out, and now the last year, they're not even comparable. I mean, the first years were just
first year they nailed it.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see for sure. Well, Ben, sure appreciate your time. It was awesome having you on here. Definitely not going to be the last time. First of many for sure. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But congratulations again on the Ichiro. It's a huge addition. Anytime anybody can add a Grail card, and hearing their story behind it.
And you got the Kobe. We both were winners recently.
Yeah, man. I know that's pretty sweet to have seen it at the show and be like, I'm going to get that card eventually. And now I have a copy that's arguably in better condition. And you have a 10 auto too, which, I mean, who cares about the rest of the stuff? That makes it perfect in my mind. So that's awesome. Well, hope you have a great weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, you
that
too.
was in the chat.
Thanks everyone that was here.
Sure appreciate it. Yep. Any final thoughts, Ben, before we sign off?
I had a blast. I've enjoyed the show ever since I found it and was watching. So it's been fun to come on and, hopefully share my story and tell people about what I do. And you can reach out to me if you're looking for stuff in that era. Contact me, and I'm excited to come back on. We got a lot of stuff to talk about.
That's right, man, for sure. Yep, check out Ben. He's at BB Card Collector on Instagram. Always happy to answer any questions, as well as like we've talked about with Greg and Alan. They're always happy to help you out. So hope you all have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you on the next one. Take care.
Sounds good. See you, everybody.